Fuck HIPAA. I think my old patient is about to die.
Disclaimer, the content presented in this video is purely fictional and intended for entertainment purposes only. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. The scenarios depicted do not reflect real-life situations and should not be interpreted as such.
In 1835, President Andrew Jackson called an emergency congressional meeting to strategize the capture of domestic terrorist known only by the enigmatic name Mr. Helping Hands. By the end of the session, Congress unanimously agreed to hire and fund a specialized team of bounty hunters to bring Mr. Helping Hands into custody. The interview recorded below provides valuable insight into the capture and containment of this entity. It must be noted that the specialized interviewer attempted to resign her position immediately following this interview, at which point she met with Director Eric W. The director told her that, the origin of an institution is less important than the institution's current outcomes. The interviewer would like to note that this is utter bullshit. Interview subject, the big bad wolf, classification string, cooperative/destructible/chthonic, titan/protean/critical/danos, primary, secondary, interviewer, Rochelle B., date, January 2nd, 2025, I do not want to tell this story, it is not mine. I should not tell it, but the man who should tell it is asleep and will never wake up, that is my fault. The people here think they made me forget that it is my fault. They are good at making me forget, but I have never forgotten this. I can't forget it even though I want to. No one knows I could not forget, because of you, they know now, they say the agency started in 1828. This is a lie. The people who became the agency joined together in 1835 to catch a demon called Mr. Helping Hands. In 1835, I was the ally of this demon. Before that, my life was made of empty years. I am not going to tell you what I did in those years. You already have your ideas. I would rather you keep your ideas because the truth is worse than any idea even you can have. Eventually I was caught. My catchers tried to kill me. I even tried to kill myself, but I could not die, so they put me in a prison that became an asylum. I lived in filth and isolation for lifetimes. Once or twice a lifetime, they tried to kill me. I tried to kill myself much more often than that. It never worked. It only hurt. I escaped when the asylum burned. I tried to help the other inmates. There was a lady there who could not speak. She only moaned like my sister used to. I tried to save her, but she was afraid of me, so I escaped alone. I did not know how to be free. The world had changed too much over the lifetimes I spent in the asylum, so I held on to what was most familiar, which was monstrousness. I was weak yet more beast than ever on the inside and the outside. People did not recognize me as human. Why would they? I did not even recognize myself as human. I attacked a frail man one morning. Killing is what makes me strong. The more brutal the killing, the stronger I become. I was tired of being weak, and I thought he would be easy prey. I was wrong. I got caught again. I thought they would send me to another asylum or a prison. But I was not human enough for that anymore. They thought I was some kind of animal. Somehow, I was sold to a carnival and put in a freak show. I was kept in chains and had food flung in my cage. The handlers liked to throw it in the corner where I could not reach without choking myself. Sometimes I could not reach no matter how hard I choked. The food spoiled. The smell was hideous, especially in summer. I still smell it in my nightmares. I still feel the filth on my skin. I feel the bugs, too. They infested my cage. They got into my hair and bit me until I had welts. I was in the freak show for a long time. When the carnival owner heard riches could be made on the American frontier, he put us onto a ship. I hated the ship. I hated the sound and stench of salt water. I hated the smell of passengers and rats. I hated how sick it made me. I lashed out. They whipped me to stop my fighting and starved me to stop my vomiting. I vomited anyway. They put my cage down in the lowest part of the ship. If I had been a man, I would have died. But I was not a man, so when we finally docked in Savannah, I was too weak to move but much more alive than I wanted to be. We had our first show that very night. They kept me in my cage without washing it or me. I knew nothing but the stench of my own filthy body. I hated being filthy. I hate being unclean. I hate that I have always been unclean, but I was too tired to care. I lay curled in my cage as the crowd came. I ignored all of them even when they threw rocks and food at me. It was a small crowd. No riches were made that evening, near moonrise, a scent cut through my own stench, gunpowder and fire. I sat up. A tall man stood before my cage. He wore a painted clown mask, and he had a hunchback. A freak, just like me. Only he was free, and I was not. He pressed his masked face to the bars. The mask's painted smile looked wet. "Hello," he said. I did not like how he looked, or how his eyes glittered through the holes in his clown face. I was glad when he left, but afraid when he came back with my owner and asked to buy me. "I have my own show," he said. He would do well with me. "Tell me your price." My owner refused and sent the freak away, but he had made me afraid. When I am afraid, I get angry. When I got angry, the crowd came back. That made me angrier. They jeered and threw things. I threw them back. I hit one man in the face, ruining his eye. I was beaten for that. They packed up the carnival immediately and left that night so no one could come to punish us for the man's ruined eye. With no crowd, I was not angry. Just tired and unthinking. I did not care where we were going. I cared only about the moonlight on the grass and the silver clouds. I had no thoughts or feelings in my head. Only sights. Some of those sights were things streaking through the trees alongside the road. They did not frighten me. I was not afraid of anything that hid in trees. I hunt what hides. Then something stepped out of the trees as the gunpowder choked me. It was a horseman. A terribly tall, deformed horseman with a hunchback and a painted clown mask that shone under the moon. Once again, the smell of gunpowder scorched my nose. As he vanished back into the trees, I thought, he's come to steal me for his freak show. That was the first fully human thought I had had in years. Moments later, our little train of carts and wagons swayed to a halt. I heard shouting, then screams and gunfire. I smelled smoke and fire, blood and above all, gunpowder. One of the carts exploded. Men on horses circled us, kicking up great clouds of dust to join the billowing smoke. It was beautiful under the moon, like a silver sea. Another cart went up in fire. People screamed. The attackers shouted and laughed. They fought with explosives, guns, knives, clubs, and arrows. I smelled blood. It made my mouth water. Among them, shifting like a phantom within the smoke and flames, was the enormous hunchbacked freak with his clown mask. By the end, the carnival owner was dead and so were many the performers. The attackers pulled me out of my cage. I was too weak to fight. That, I think, is what saved me. The outlaws were not what I expected. They all looked different not only from me, but from each other. Many were Indians, many of them young. Some were even younger than I had been when I was abandoned in the snow. They bound me and forced me to kneel with the other survivors. The great hulking freak in the clown mask approached through dust and smoke as the sun began to rise. I hated how his eyes shone through the mask. They did not look human or animal or alive or dead. Then the freak leaned down before the first survivor and removed his mask. The man screamed. He did not stop. The freak moved on to the second survivor who was already sobbing. He knelt before each of them, one by one, and removed his mask. Each time they screamed. None stopped screaming even after the freak put his mask back on. Finally, it was my turn. When this monstrosity stepped before me, blocking out the sun, I felt fear beyond fear. Terror and something like ecstasy, because I knew, somehow, that I was kneeling before a god. He leaned over me as his long, glistening fingers lifted off his mask. I do not remember what I saw, but I remember having my second human thought, this is the worst thing I will ever see. As I stared into his face, his smell changed. No longer gunpowder. Something else, something I did not recognize. Rich and sweet, dark and a bit powdery. It made me remember how it felt to be safe in my mother's house. The smell made me angry. Thinking of home always makes me angry, but it soothed me. The god put his mask back on. "What are you?" "A wolf," I said. Those were the first words I had spoken in lifetimes. The god shook his head. "I know wolves." "You're no wolf. You're like me. I should kill you." "Nothing can kill me." "No. There is only one thing I cannot kill. I will show you." He beckoned and something loped towards us, something awful. Like a rotten animal broken down and rebuilt into a man. It had white eyes and the smile of a rat-eaten corpse. I would know. I saw many of those in the asylum. Its flesh was wet and thin. Mottled like shadows in a forest. It had the ears of a fox and haunches like I have never seen. It was much too human, and yet much too far from human. It smiled. Its smile made me feel madness, so I looked away. What is it? I asked. She is something you would not understand, and don't need to. I decided that no god could keep company with such a monster. Only demons keep company with demons. The hunchback demon stared at me while his party loaded spoils onto their horses. His eyes glittered through the mask. Finally he said, I am not going to kill you until I know what you are. Then he hauled me to my feet. He said something in a language I did not understand, only then did I realize he had been speaking French to me, and cut the ropes binding my feet. That is how I met Mr. Helping Hands, his band treated like a freak. All were afraid of me, but they laughed at me too. The demon made me walk alongside his horse. He did not speak to me much, but when he did it was in French. On the third morning, he asked, what did you see? I did not understand. He explained, anyone who looks on my face and live sees two things, what they love most, and what will kill them. What did you see? I saw nothing. There was only a smell. A smell. His eyes shone. Only one. Only one. Then you are very unlucky. I am very unlucky, too. Speaking of smells, the demon's smell was overpowering. I did not like it. I have only ever liked how women smell, but I trusted it. It is the first thing I trusted since my sister. After that, the demon explained that he was called Mr. Helping Hands because he lended a helping hand to those who needed him. Those who needed his hands most were those who had nothing. Those whose rights and freedoms and lands had been taken, or never been at all. The best way to help these people was to stop settlers from migrating west. Mr. Helping Hands and his band traveled the frontier, putting on shows to earn money. They also earned money by robbing wealthy travelers and stealing from plantations. They used the money to purchase weapons and supplies for themselves and for others who aimed to stop the settlers. The government saw this as a great crime, and sent soldiers and bounty hunters after them. I am famous, Mr. Helping Hands told me. There is a monstrous price on my head, all because I am interfering with a monstrous injustice. Mr. Helping Hands told me of this injustice. How every time the settlers came west, more Indians were killed or removed. As we speak, the army is marching thousands and thousands away from their homes. Why? So they can give those homes to someone else. He brought his ragged band together to stop this. They were orphans, outcasts, and criminals, mostly young but a few old. Most are people who have had everything taken from them, or who never had anything at all. Mr. Helping Hands said. A few have taken everything from others but wish to undo what they have inflicted. None have anywhere to go but here. Many were Muskogee. 2 were Lakota, a brother and his sister who the demon particularly loved. Others were Seminole and Cherokee. Some were freedmen and runaway slaves. A few were women. Usually I was dangerous to women, but not these because they smelled like Mr. Helping Hands. They all did, though they smelled the same. The band did not always get along with each other. There were wounds that had been inflicted during their time together, old wounds that preceded their alliance, and wounds that were older than any of them. Often, it felt like the only thing they had in common was hatred of me. One night, angry voices woke me. They were arguing with Mr. Helping Hands. The Lakota boy, Chatan, and his sister Macha led the argument while others watched. I had picked up enough of their languages to know they were talking about me. They wanted Mr. Helping Hands to kill me, or at least to cut me loose because they thought I was a demon. No, said Mr. Helping Hands. He stays. He is like me. No one had ever said that about me, not that I could remember. Nothing more was said about it. Many of his bands still treated me as less than a human, but that was not new and it did not bother me. It bothered me that the horses hated me. Even the horses did not hate me much as they hated the white-eyed monster. She, at least, did not seem to hate me. On the 5th day, we stopped in a town so that Mr. Helping Hands could perform. That was his band did, found small settlements and towns and stopped to put on a show. This served 2 purposes, money, and spying. While the riders made their horses do tricks and the shooters performed with their arrows and guns, others worked through the audience, taking money and listening. This is how they chose their targets, and stayed ahead of the bounty hunters and the government. By listening, everyone did their part, but Mr. Helping Hands was the star. He is who everyone came to see. He was famous. And for good reason. He could climb up walls and cling to ceilings like a spider. He could jump like a giant rabbit and run circles around a room touching only the walls. He was impossibly strong and could lift entire wagons with one hand. When he sang, his voice was hypnotic. Most importantly, he was a freak. I knew freaks. I was a freak. No freak I have ever seen compared to him. Mr. Helping Hands was no hunchback. What I took for a hump were extra arms wrapped always around his own back. He hid them except during performances. The sight of all of his arms drew astonishment from the audiences, even those who had seen him many times. I saw several performances, and each time the sight astonished me, too. On the 9th day, we came upon a small plantation. I thought we stopped to give a private performance. For I knew plantations were wealthy. We did not stop for that. We stopped so Mr. Helping Hands and his band could slaughter every man, woman, and child who was not a slave. Then they stole their money, their valuables, and their best horses. I was aghast. What right do you have to judge us? Mr. Helping Hands asked. He thinks we should act like heroes, Chatan said. Tell him that the only difference between a hero and monster is how the story is told. I was still upset. I was upset the entire night. I stayed upset until the next day, when we came upon a new target, soldiers, marching people between them. I recognized them as Muskogee. Mr. Helping Hands ordered us to pull back until the soldiers and their wards were specks on the horizon. We kept pace with them all day, waiting until they settled down for the night. That is when we struck. I have never seen such a strike. It was glorious. Fire, explosives, bullets and blades, all rained down on the soldiers and their captives. The soldiers were killed. The captives ran. I did not understand why. We were saving them. I understood even less why Mr. Helping Hands didn't go after them. It's their choice to come to me or not, he told me. You did not give me a choice. Monsters have no choices. His words hurt me. When I feel hurt, I become angry, but before I got too angry, Mr. Helping Hands said, I don't have choices either. I am a monster too. The captives were almost too far away to see. Even for me. We should go after them. They will be safer. I did not come to keep them safe. I came only to help. What they do with my help is their choice. I did not sleep that night, but I was no longer upset, and the next time Mr. Helping Hands found a target, I was a great help. Even Chatan said so. I killed so many I became strong again. I thought that meant Mr. Helping Hands would cut the ropes around my hands. No, he told me. Not until you are trained. Training hasn't even begun. Mr. Helping Hands had his fighters who traveled, performed, and wore the forced marches. He loved his fighters, but the fighters were not all he loved. He had a camp where the fighters kept their loved ones. The people who could not fight or did not want to, but still wanted to be near the demons' helping hands. Many were children and women. The camp is where he brought me to be trained. There at the camp, my humanity, such as it was, failed me. I am ashamed of what I did and even more ashamed of what I tried to do. Chatan and the other fighters wanted to kill me. Mr. Helping Hands stopped them only by promising he would tear me apart himself if I did a single thing wrong. Then he said, he is a dog. All dogs need to be trained. I am good at being trained, so it did not take long. My mother trained me long ago. Mr. Helping Hands trained like she did. He trained me to do chores, to do work, and to understand that the women and the children were all someone. You must not hurt anyone who is someone, and you must never use your teeth on them. I still must be trained to see something as someone. Sometimes it is easy, sometimes difficult. It does not matter. Once you are someone, I am safe unless I am made to forget. I was taught to see everyone in the camp as someone's. The demons people still thought me a monster. They did not want me near the women. They didn't have to be afraid because all of the women were someone to me. I have never touched anyone who is someone to me. I have never wanted to. They did not trust me when I said this, but they trusted Mr. Helping Hands when he said it, and they trusted him when he said my training was done. Once I was trained, Mr. Helping Hands told me I was to guard the settlement while the fighters were away. He left the white-eyed horror with the rat-eaten smile. If you forget your training, she will remind you. To my surprise, she could speak. Until then I had only heard her make clicks and keens, like angry insects or tortured animals. Her voice slithered like snakes over leaves, but it was not unpleasant. She told me she was the sister of Mr. Helping Hands. They had been born far away in the north. Their mother was a Mi'kmaq woman, their father an Acadian fur trapper. Both died in the 7 Years' War. Winter came after, she told me. My brother and I were starving. We were not the only ones. Starving men came upon us one night. I do not know if they were English, Acadian, Wabanaki, or something else. I used to know, but no longer. I only know that they slaughtered me while my brother screamed. They butchered me and put my pieces in a pot to boil. I remember how the bubbling water made my pieces drift and shift. It was beautiful. The strings of my boiled flesh danced like small eels. I asked how she had transformed from boiled bones to the monster before me. She did not answer except to smile. I smiled back. Guarding the camp was not difficult. No one there was helpless. All could fight except the sickest. I liked that. I liked that I could learn from them, and I liked that they could learn from me. I liked to be taught. I liked to teach, and I liked to fight. There was much fighting to be done. Bounty hunters often came seeking runaway slaves and rogue Indians. I know how to deal with bounty hunters. I enjoy it. I taught the camp to enjoy it too. I guided one fierce little blind boy in such a hunt. He killed the man all by himself. I did not even help, the boy was celebrated. So was I. I was still not an equal, but I did not have to be an equal for that night to be one of the best of my life. When Mr. Helping Hands returned, I was happy and very well trained. He told me I finally looked more man than wolf. I was not happy to hear this because I did not want to be a man. Mr. Helping Hands had brought new someones to stay at the camp. Old someones were staying, too, Chatan and his sister, Matcha. I knew Chatan and Matcha. I knew they were someones, but they no longer smelled like someones. Matcha smelled like the opposite of a someone. Like she had turned her back on being someone. My nose never lies, so I told Mr. Helping Hands. I expected him to listen. He always listened, but he did not listen now. He said, "Everyone in this camp is dear to me, even you. But understand this, alone of all of you. Matcha is my heart. This hurt me. It makes me angry to be hurt." I asked, "Are you hers?" "I am not hers. I never will be. That doesn't matter. You and I are monsters. Monsters always serve our penance. The only penance we serve is love. I have already served all the penance I can take. I will never serve more. You will. What you smelled when you saw my face is your penance. It's coming for you, just as mine came for me." He grabbed my face and forced me to look into his eyes, shining and squirming behind his mask. "Matcha is my heart. If you rip out my heart, I will make you suffer until the end of ends. And when the new beginning comes after, I will find you and make you suffer again." This made me so angry. It is not that I wanted to be dearest to him, the opposite, if anything, but I could not stop wondering what it would be like to have my own matcha, or wondering what it would be like to be matcha for someone else, but only as someone can be a heart. I was not someone. I was only a dog. I tried to be a good dog and ignore what my nose told me. I failed. I could not tolerate matcha's new smell, or Chatan's. I no longer saw them as someone's. Chatan sensed the change. One night we got into a fight. Matcha got between us, and I was stopped. Mr. Helping Hands struck me down himself. I was made to sleep outside, bound and tied in a pit. The pit was cold and dirty. It made me remember the asylum. It made me remember how it is to be unclean. It reminded me that I have always been unclean. Chatan came that night with some of the others. I don't remember their faces now, only their anger and their laughter. They used branches and spears to hit me. One slopped old food over me. I felt as angry as in the freak show, and helpless as when I was a child. Before his smell changed, Chatan had been someone to me. I knew I had never been someone to him, and I knew I never would be. But I had hoped the others saw me differently. Now I knew they did not. I should have understood them as Mr. Helping Hands understood me. When I am who I want to be, I understand others. When I am not, I do not. I was not myself. I was the beast in the forest, the freak in his cage, the child wailing alone in the snow. I did not understand anything except that I was being hurt. When they finished, I chewed through my ropes, crawled out of the pit, and ran. I found water and scrubbed my skin until I bled. I thought of the asylum and the freak show and everything that came before. I felt hatred for those places and for Mr. Helping Hands for treating me the same. Then I slept. I dreamed of Mr. Helping Hands, of what I saw under his mask. I was ashamed of running, but glad I would never see his face again. Those weeks were a blur, even though I wanted to be strong. I did not kill anyone because I did not want to be a monster again. I did not want to be sold to a freak show or put in an asylum. I did not want Mr. Helping Hands to find me, so I traveled alone, stealing and hunting and listening. Listening is how I learned of the new bounty hunters. A team of experts commissioned specially to catch the demon and his outlaws. I paid no attention. Many bounty hunters had come for Mr. Helping Hands. All failed. These would fail too. A few days later, I caught a scent so sharp it stung my nose. When I catch a scent this way, I always seek it. Not because it means well for me, it often does not, but because such a scent seems to know me. I want to be known. I always go where I am known. I followed the scent inside and in, and saw them. More importantly, I smelled them. Their smell told me who they were, the special new bounty hunters. I settled in to listen, but not speak. I never meant to speak. Please know that. Though I ran from Mr. Helping Hands and his people, they were still someone's to me. They still are. The leader noticed me because I was noticeable. I looked less human than I do now. He had a bright smile. He was almost as tall as me. He studied me like the crowds at the freak show did before they laughed and threw things. This man did not laugh or throw things. He did not flinch. He did not frown. He only studied me with his bright eyes. Finally, he approached me. "What's your name, sir?" "Wolf," I said, "Mr. Wolf." "I'm Mr. Wingeride." He was English like the people in the asylum. Hearing the accent was hard, but it was also familiar. I was trapped and alone, abandoned and lost and barely human. Anything familiar was a comfort, so when he spoke, I answered. When I had given enough answers, he cut to the heart of his intent and asked if I knew an outlaw called Mr. Helping Hands. I lied. Please know I lied. He was not fooled, but he pretended to be. I knew he was pretending. I know he knew I knew he was pretending, but he still told me about this terrible outlaw. This mass murderer, a treasonist whose mask hid the face of a demon. He told me all about this demon and his gang of bloodthirsty criminals. How they incited uprisings and revolts. How they murdered soldiers and good innocent settlers. How they stole money and weapons to give to other treasonists. How this demon was an obstacle to peace and progress. How the only way to stop him was to kill him. I was hired to do just that, he finished. Thank you for listening, Mr. Wolf. He touched my shoulder. Not familiar, but respectful. The way I had seen equals do. Then he bought me food. You look hungry. If you're still hungry after you finish, come back. I'll buy you more. I was still hungry after, but I did not go back. Instead, I went to my summons to warn them the bounty hunters were close. It took many days. When I reached the settlement, they were gone. Camp was broken, the ashes cold. I could track them if I wanted. I knew all their smells. I know them still. I decided not to. They were still my someones, but I was not their someone. I returned to the inn. The bounty hunters were long gone, but I caught their smell, metal and paper money and old blood, and tracked them. When I found their camp, Mr. Wingeride smiled. He made room for me to sit and had the cook bring me a plate. I suppose that is where it began. He introduced his people. I don't remember them all. I remember the Norwegian witch and the priest Cortez because they worked together constructing absurd traps and machines that they hoped to use to on Mr. Helping Hands. I remember their machines better than I remember them. I don't remember the others. At the end, Mr. Wingeride told me to call him Thomas. He did not treat me like a dog or a monster or a lunatic or a boy or a son. He treated me like a man, and he made his team treat me like a man, too. They gave me clean clothes and shoes that fit. They let me bathe as often as I wanted and they let me use as much soap as I could. It was such a small thing, but not to me. Feeling clean is everything to me. In return, I told them Mr. Helping Hands was a monster. Something they had never seen, something they could not defeat. I hoped to scare them and make them abandon their purpose. But when I told him, Thomas only smiled and told me more about the crimes of Mr. Helping Hands. I could tell he thought he was describing great evils. But I did not hear great evils in his words. All I heard was a fight against evils. I asked him what he would do if someone stole his home and forced him 1,000 miles away from everything he loved in exchange for nothing. He told me he was strong, and such things never happen to the strong. That was the law of nature, the strong dominate the weak if the weak are lucky, and devour them if they are not. No one would ever devour him because he would never allow it. I did not tell him that my someones had not allowed anything to be done to them. I wanted to, but I wanted to feel clean even more. There were other things I did not tell him. I did not tell him about my nose. I did not tell him that I could lead him to Mr. Helping Hands at any time. I wanted to be clean, but not so much as to betray my someones. Thomas did not need my help anyway. One night he came very close. The gunpowder scent of Mr. Helping Hands was so sharp it choked me. I could not stand it, so I crept away from the bounty hunters and ran off to warn my someones. The white-eyed sister with the rat-eaten smile caught me and dragged me through the camp to Mr. Helping Hands. "You smell like bounty hunters," he said. "Like old blood and paper money and stolen steel." He grabbed at my throat. I saw his eyes through the mask, glittering in the moon over the painted smile. The people gathered around us. I saw the white-eyed sister. I saw Chatan and Matcha and all the others, watching me like a beast in a cage. As the demon's eyes sparkled and his hands tightened on my throat, everything in me broke. He was not someone anymore. There are no rules to stop me hurting what isn't someone. I grabbed the demon's head in my hands and twisted. The strength it took, I do not know if I have such strength now. I felt my muscles tear. I felt pressure and pain in my eyes, and then I felt his neck break. It did not kill him. Such things do not kill Mr. Helping Hands. Or even keep him down long, but he crumpled to the ground for a moment. Guilt consumed me. I knelt to help him, but Matcha shoved me away. I saw hatred and disgust in her face. She called me something. I did not understand her words, but I understood her meaning. When she took his head in her hands, Mr. Helping Hands stirred. His bones clicked as they knit together. His great glistening hands flexed and crept toward his mask. I ran. I went to Thomas Wingeride and told him everything. He already had plans for just such an event, so they were ready before I finished. The witch and the priest were particularly excited to use their absurd machines. Together, we attacked the camp of my someones. Many died. I killed most who died. It made me very strong. I tried to kill Chatanan and Matcha too, but Thomas would not let me. I did not understand why until the end, when they turned on Mr. Helping Hands. Under the pretense of asking him to protect her, Matcha led him near the priest's absurd weapon. The priest fired. The demon dodged it, barely, then he gave Matcha a look that made even me shudder, and escaped with his survivors. Afterward, Matcha fought with Thomas about me. "Why is that demon dog with you?" She screamed. Thomas said, "Call him that again, and I will return you to the freak myself." Matcha and Chatan no longer hurt my nose. They did not smell like someone's. But they smelled like Wingeride. I told you, my nose never lies. I told Thomas everything I knew. How the band operated, strategized, and attacked. I told him that Mr. Helping Hands loves everyone in his band, but that Matcha alone was his heart and his weakness. How she glared at me when I said that. How I glared back. I also told Thomas how killing makes me strong. The more I killed, the more brutal I was, the stronger I become. The one thing I did not tell him was my nose. Even though Mr. Helping Hands was no longer someone, I did not want my nose to catch him, but Thomas did not need my nose to catch him. The government told him that Mr. Helping Hands would likely attack another forced march and told us to go and keep watch. They didn't call it a forced march, of course, but that is what it was. Hundreds of people being taken thousands of miles away from homes that had been stolen from them. As I watched, I smelled gunpowder and fire. Then I saw a tall, hunchbacked horseman in the trees. I told no one. At sunset, he attacked. Explosions, fires, bullets, blood. Not as much as before, but enough, and I wanted to help. I wanted to help more than I have ever wanted anything. I wanted to do the right thing. I wanted to make the right choice even though it was too late. I ran into the fight to find Mr. Helping Hands. To offer my help, and then offer to let him kill me when we were done, but I was too slow to find him. Just as I was too slow to make the right choice, when I finally found him, the priest had already wounded him with one of his ridiculous inventions, the one that looked like a catapult. The wound was so terrible that the demon's chest was still caved in. I knelt beside him. I would have killed for him. Please know that. I would have died for him. I would have dragged him out of the fight myself. I would have taken the priest's catapult to my own chest if it would save him. When I knelt, Mr. Helping Hands took off his mask and looked into me. He saw into me. I felt terror beyond anything I have ever known, and shame worse than that. Crushing, crippling, devastating shame for what I've done and what I am. For what I have always been, for what I will always be, he made sure I knew all of this. He made sure I knew it did not matter that I made the right choice. He made sure I knew that the right choice does not matter if it is made too late. As I stared into his face, knowing all of these things, Thomas found us. He said to put the demon's mask back on. I did as I was told. Cortez and the witch incapacitated him with another of their inventions. Together we brought him back to our base. When Macha saw him, she wailed. Even Chatan wept. Why? Mr. Helping Hands asked her. You are my heart. Why did you rip yourself out? For peace, she told him. You are everything except peace. She told him she wanted a home and an end to the fighting. She wanted to settle and grow. She wanted a family, she wanted a life, to love and be loved, but not like this, she finished. To hear her say this to him made even me want to die. They promised not to hurt you, she said. That was the first thing I made them promise. You'll be treated well, given the honor and respect you deserve. Your life is safe. Off to the side, Cortez was working with his absurd catapult. I wondered why. Mr. Helping Hand said, it is not my life I worry for. And before the words left his mouth, Winger-eyed shot Chatan, then he pointed his gun at Macha. I did not think. I only moved, meaning to get between her and Winger-eyed even if it meant my death. When she saw me, she recoiled. Thomas shot her, then smiled at me as Mr. Helping Hands lunged. At that moment, Cortez fired his absurd catapult, smashing Mr. Helping Hand's head. It did not kill him. It never kills him. But it incapacitated him long enough for Cortez and the witch to trap him in the ludicrous cage. That is how we caught Mr. Helping Hands, and how the agency began. I do not know if Thomas knew I tried to return to Mr. Helping Hands. I think he did, but he did not treat me as if he knew. He treated me well. He kept me so clean that I could pretend I'd never been unclean. He let me choose my own clothes and he let me wash them so much they fell apart long before their time. He commissioned me as an officer for his new agency and made me his partner. Together we traveled the country catching more monsters, none of which were monstrous as me. He let me kill as often and brutally as I needed to become strong because I am afraid to be weak. When you're weak, people hurt you. He made me believe I was his equal, only much later did I understand he did treat me as an equal. He had only trained me as his dog. I was too stupid then to know the difference. I am too stupid now to care. They still treat me like a good dog who gets good rewards for good work, but the truth is I am a bad man who gets bad rewards for bad work. I am too filthy to be a dog, too unclean to ever be a wolf. I don't want to be unclean. They want to make me forget what I want. That is what they do when they take me downstairs. They make me forget who I want to be. They also want to make me forget that you are very much someone. I don't want to forget that you are someone. That does not mean I like you. I hate you. I hate you for how you look at me. I hate you for what you think of me. I hate you for what you see in me. And I hate you for how you smell to me. Cheap lipstick and expensive chocolate. That is what I smelled when Mr. Helping Hands showed me his face. That means you are my most important someone. I wanted to be the most important someone. I never wanted to have a most important someone. I hate that I do. I hate that it's you. I hate you because it's you. But I hate what I am even more, so I will not go downstairs again. I will not do what they tell me. I will not let them make me strong. I will be weak. I will be an inmate. The last time I was an inmate, I forgot I was a man. I forgot my name. I forgot what it felt like to be clean. I am afraid that will happen again. More afraid than I have ever been. Even though I am afraid, it is the right choice. Making the right choice means nothing when you make it too late, but I have made it anyway.